beautifully. And I think the series discussing the new normal is quite meaningful and contextual these days. And I'm honored to be in the panel along with Dr. Prasad and uh, experts from the World Vision and our own faculty members, the organizers, and so on, and the participants. Um, Let me start. I think since the group consists of not only social work faculty and students, also from other disciplines, I would start with looking at what the new normal is for education per se. And then at the end, maybe talk a little about social work education. Now, as you know, ever since the lockdown was announced, schools and colleges have been remaining closed. And as on 24th May, approximately about 1.7 billion learners are currently affected all over the world due to school and college closures. And according to UNICEF, 153 countries are currently implementing nationwide closures and impacting about 98% of the world's student population. So that's the number of students that have been affected because of the closure. And as you know, schools and colleges are usually the first to be closed and last to be opened. Any eventuality, you can see that happening. Even I think there was on the lighter vein, somebody was saying it sounds very non-essential, this education itself, including higher education, that it's first to be shut down and then last to be opened. Some colleges have also been converted to quarantine centers or places to host migrants and so on. So this is a context in which we are talking about this new normal. But what is this new normal? We need to think whether it's normal. I'm just wondering if this is normal, because right now I'm talking to the laptop as if I'm talking to persons. So I'm just wondering whether this is really normal. Anyway, on the lighter vein, I think we've been training ourselves for this new normal by talking to our mobiles, complete with all the gestures and emotions that we used to talk to persons before us. So I guess we are geared up and ready for the so-called new normal. But I think new normal is becoming a reality slowly. And in terms of education, you can see there's a massive movement towards online education. Immediately after this lockdown was announced, there was a lot of announcements by the UGC to look at how we can transact education through online. But I think for colleges abroad, this was relatively easy as they were already transacting partly online. But for countries like ours, it was really a struggle. It is a struggle and it continues to be a struggle, and it will continue to be a struggle for quite some time because of the diversity we have, the differences in infrastructure in urban areas and rural areas, and particularly where we have not yet got into the mode of online education in several places. Several colleges have never even thought about it. Neither do they have the infrastructure for it. So that's the new normal that we are facing. We need to confront that. And the new normal also means education is being outsourced to companies rather than colleges because of the massive online courses, this MOOC and other courses, which the companies are going to manage. I think there's a statistics with me saying that by 2022, the global e-learning industry is projected to surpass about $243 billion of business. So that's a massive business that we are looking at. And again, this new normal will also mean that there are global teachers, and you can learn from global teachers. You have global content before you in the laptop, and you want to join a course, you can join and learn. But how much is it locally relevant? That's other question that we need to ask ourselves about the new normal in terms of this access to online education, the e-courses or e-learning courses, and so on. And, the new normal also brings in one very interesting thing, that online education is going to cost only a fraction of the regular education cost for the learner. For the learner, the online education cost is going to be a very, very small fraction of regular education. This may result in large universities sometimes going bankrupt because of the huge infrastructure they have set up for the normal education. Now, when we come to this new normal, which is going to be increasingly online, then what do we do with that in kind of infrastructure? We may have to come up with some solutions for using this large infrastructure. And I think students may not be willing to pay such large fees, like even Harvard University or somewhere where the fees is quite high. Students may not be willing to pay so much, even if it's for a Harvard University online course, because it's going to through Zoom or some other online platform. They're not going to have live discussions with eminent faculty in the classrooms, and with peer learning is not going to happen. So that is a big challenge that large universities have to face, colleges have to face in the future, probably, while trying to adjust to this new normal. So which also means that migration for education may also come down. So for instance, in the US, if you take majority, at least 21% of students are from China, and the next number is about 19% is from India. So that's a number that migrate to other countries for higher education. That may come down because it's available online. While these are some of the pointers, but again, locally in our country itself, there has been already some movement towards an alternative to the regular classroom education. You may have heard about homeschooling, the National Institute of Open Schooling, where several children who are otherwise engaged in sports and arts and so on, they pursue their probably their +2 and degrees through NIOS. So that may gain popularity in the new normal. And of course, there are also challenges that can come up with the new normal. For instance, how do you negotiate internships? And how do we do internships? Because it's going to be online, or particularly during the COVID and post-COVID scenarios, how do we work out these internships for students? And again, placements, there is also prediction that placements might suffer because businesses are going to take some time to recoup and start their regular operations. And so particularly with the migrant labor also, there is a movement, and when we'll have enough people to work, and all that is a greater concern. So placements might be, I'm just talking from the student's perspective and the education perspective. But more than all this, I think the new normal has brought to the front, the digital divide, which we've been talking about for a long time. The digital divide, originally we were talking from between north and south. There is northern hemisphere, northern countries, and southern hemisphere countries. But now within the country, we have a huge digital divide, which has been brought to the fore. I think the new normal has thrown up challenges of bandwidth for students, the gadgets that are required, whether they have or not, and even gender differences, because who has access to it? Of course, we may say that all of them are having mobiles, but when it comes to bandwidth in the house, who is going to hog all the bandwidth, and whether there is going to be gender differences. And finally, more serious is probably the new normal. We need to address the social costs. Now, it's easy to say, okay, close down the colleges or restricted schools particularly, and then do it from home. But how many homes in the country have the required environment for children to study? How many homes, even for school, for college students, whatever, how many homes have the required environment for people to sit and study? Homes are not made for studying. Homes are made for homes, for people to live as families, and they cannot probably be, because it's a new normal, converted into places of study. So there are also other social costs, like, for example, schooling. Now school children are at home. Now, one of the very important welfare measures, or very important aspect in school education, is the nutrition that they get from schools, the noon meals, that they are missing now, right? So which is a major problem for children in particularly rural and tribal areas. And world over, whenever schools have been closed and students are staying at home, there has been a rise in violence. There has been a rise in abuse. We have seen in our country itself, there has been a rise in violence against women and violence against girls. So, and we have also seen that in the earlier pandemics, that whenever, particularly in Africa, whenever colleges and schools are closed, marriages were happening early, and pregnancies were also coming up in much numbers. So these are some of the social costs that are associated with this kind of a new normal, where education institutions are closed, and we seem to be trying to address it by an online education. But these are some of the concerns that are not really addressed by the new normal, and the economic burden that the parents are facing now, and the social isolation, because children from in schools and colleges have a lot of peer support from the classmates and things like that. Now they are isolated. So these are some of the social costs that this new normal has to tackle with. Now, now I just asked some of my students to respond to a quick survey, and about 30 of them responded on what they feel, because students are important stakeholders. So, what they feel about this new normal, and sudden closure, and then suddenly they have to shift to online, and what do they feel about it? I think some of the responses I can just read out to you. Now, first, probably, what is the impact of the sudden closure of colleges? Most students have said that they are stressed out, they felt blank. Some of them were confused. Some of them felt let down because at the end of the academic year, and some felt very unhappy. Of course, one or two have said that they are very happy as it broke the monotony of daily classes. Yes, of course. And some have said that initially it felt very good, but as days went by, it became very tedious because they expected the lockdown to be over for a month or so. But then now it went on being extended once in 14 days, once in 15 days. Then it became very tedious. And some have said that we felt sad to miss our friends. Um, some said that they may not miss the classes, but they do miss their friends. And particularly the final year students, they said that they're feeling very anxious about exams and when we can proceed with our exams and results and then our career and all that. So there's a lot of anxiety around that because of the sudden closure. Now, I had asked them, are you missing something? What are you missing now? Of course, they said that they are missing the classes and the friends. They're missing the friends, and several of them said they're also missing their visit to the library. And they're missing field work, particularly social work students. They're missing helping people outside. They're missing. I'm glad that one or two have said that they're missing the faculty, and hostel, some are missing the actual classroom experience, interacting with co-students and faculty. They're missing the peer group and overall college environment. They said they are missing. Now, I also asked them, okay, what is your experience with online webinars? Because immediately at Madras School of Social Work, as soon as the college closed, from the next week onwards, we started into online classes, online, examinations, Viva, a little bit of Viva, and completing some portions, and all that we started. So, and of course, now we are having a series of webinars, that the kind of webinars that we are having now. So I asked them, what is your experience with online webinars? They said that, okay, several were good because, we don't need to travel. We can sit in the comfort of our home and listen to them. Several were very good also, but sometimes they found it hard to engage it fully, as there were a lot of distracting factors around in the home. In the home environment itself, there was a lot of distraction. And without proper face-to-face interaction and guidance, the online lectures weren't as much useful as offline classes, on in-campus classes. And sometimes there are also technical flaws. And but it is good, but it can never be compared to the experience we have in classroom learning. And there was also limited time for questions. Apart from that, there were also other experiences, like now some students felt that now students have started using internet for this learning. Earlier, they were using internet only for social media, but now it has changed. I think that's something very positive. But some have said that we couldn't concentrate much. So occasionally we would put it on mute and not very serious, sometimes lying on bed and listening. I'm not sure how many are doing that now for this lecture even. But generally, world over, we have seen that even for, if you look at the MOOC, massive online open courses completion rates, it's around hovers around 13 to 15% only. Those who enroll, only about 13 to 15% complete the MOOC courses, particularly if they are free. So that's a challenge of online course. Apart from that, of course, in our country, in a resource challenged places, particularly there are network issues. There is a cost of bandwidth and in-house competition for the gadget and the bandwidth. There are two children in the house, and parents are also sometimes working from home, and all of them compete for the bandwidth and the gadgets. And one student has said like this. I am just reading out. I don't have a laptop, due to which I'm forced to be on my phone for the online education. This results in neck pain, eye strain, and I feel isolated. Unlike classes where you can sit with peers attending the class, and the person doing the online teaching also does not check whether students pay attention or not. It's very much true, or probably the technology is not that much allowing us. And sometimes students cancel the video and they just don't pay attention. And if there's a power cut, there won't be network. And another disadvantage is the time limit, because it's like fixed time and you can't have questions also beyond the time sometimes. So these are some of the experiences that are coming from students when I ask them about their experiences with online education. Of course, in this group of 30 students, 77% of them are having laptops. So that's a good number. I don't think that's the same with rural areas where the students have that many number of laptops with them and things like that. But laptop is one thing, but online education is transacted through internet, and bandwidth is very important. I found that among in the 30 students, 22% have less than 1 GB per day bandwidth. And about 55% have 1 to 2 GB per day bandwidth. And there are others, some of them don't have, some of them have more than 2 GB. Now, the point is, if you run a webinar for, let's say, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, about 1.5 GB goes off. Then that's the only thing that they can do with it. Then they can't do anything for their social media interest. And probably if they want to attend another webinar later in the day, they won't be able to do. So that's a limitation that they have been facing with this online course. So now, when we say this is going to be a new normal, these are some of the issues that we need to grapple with while trying to, which means we need to address all these issues gradually and see how we can get ready for the new normal. But I will come to it whether we need to get ready or we need to go back to the old normal, I think, which is much more friendly, much more friendly for both faculty and students, except the travel and other costs involved. But interestingly, the University Grants Commission, I think, was very remarkable. It came up with a lot of, I think almost every week we were getting information from the UGC on what we can do, what colleges can do with regard to this shutdown and lockdown and work from home. Immediately, they suggested that colleges can be closed and people can work from home. Both faculty and staff can work from home. And they also gave a list of activities faculty members can do during lockdown, like publishing papers or preparing for the next year's classes, converting some of the material into online courses, and student induction programs, planning for that, and so on. They had given a nice list of work that can be done by faculty. And they also opened a helpline for students to air grievances. And then later on, they followed it up by providing a list of 82 UG courses and 42 PG courses in SWAYAM platform. Some of your faculty may be aware of this. And they also recommended online internships. Now, this is something very interesting, which is very relevant for social work in particular. And they also advised that the syllabus can be completed through online mode. They also suggested practical exams and Viva OC can be completed online. And they also suggested a tentative admission and college reopening schedule. And one of the suggestions for the new academic year is probably, they said that 25% of the syllabus can be through online teaching and 75% through face-to-face teaching in the coming academic year. So that's a new normal we are talking about. We are gradually moving towards. And of course, 6-day week pattern to compensate. Now, this is what the government, the UGC has responded. I think it's remarkable that there's a very clear direction given to all of us as educators of what we need to think of in terms of this new normal in education. Now, coming to social work in particular, I was looking at social work colleges in India and abroad. Most social work colleges, almost all of them, all over the world, suspended classes and field work, both immediately. When there was a threat of the COVID in their countries, I think they suspended, and they suspended field work also. the abrupt end of the fieldwork in particular caused some issues with work with clients. Sometimes they were work was not completed with clients, the casework or whatever was not completed. And some organizations, some colleges try to encourage students to complete it online if possible with the NGOs which were providing them those experiences. And quickly, most colleges abroad and some colleges in the country moved to online classes, both synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous is, when students are there, ours right now, this session is a synchronous session, and asynchronous is basically when send the material and people can look at it anytime they want. And of course, a lot of webinars were arranged, particularly Madras School of Social Work. We had, I think, at least 15 to 20 webinars in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So that's a kind of response we were able to make in terms of online sharing of information or education. And we also came up with short courses. I think that's an experience with several colleges in the country and other abroad also. So that was one thing that happened in social work education. And what we also did was we had to complete some portions and some assignments were pending. So we modified the assignments to enable them to do it from home and through online resources. We reduced the quantum of assignments to some extent. And we also managed to do some online viva voce examinations with even people from the field, from NGOs and organizations joining through Zoom to participate in the viva examination. And we extended some deadlines. So these were some of the things that we did to adjust to the new normal in terms of education, social work education, particularly. And then, of course, one of the major concerns was field work. For social work, field work is very important, crucial, and non-negotiable, and so on. So what was done was, I think we reduced some hours of field work because we had to close it abruptly, and we said, okay, this is fine. And particularly then we had to, the next component that was coming up was summer internship. So what we did was we found a list of areas. I think we wrote down, we brainstormed a list of tasks that can be done from home. And we also suggested, wherever possible, if there's an organization that permits you to do their internship in that organization from home, you can get into those kind of organizations and do it from home. Otherwise, we also gave an illustrative list of tasks that can be done. For example, you can read and review literature related to the chosen internship focus area. You can do a desk research on an issue and report on the same. You can identify TED Talks or YouTube videos or podcasts, etc., related to the specialization focus of internship and write a one-page reflection on each of the materials seen. You could even complete an online training on the chosen focus area of internship. That was one of the tasks that we suggested to our students. And you could review websites of organizations related to the focus, and you can compile a report. You could create a blog and post articles on the chosen focus area. For instance, there's a lot of issues happening with migrant labor. Students can always, look at articles appearing and then compile some information and then bring out a dossier on the issue. So that will be a good contribution to knowledge and meaningful also in terms of the internships. And they could explore legislation, policies related to the chosen focus area and write a summary of findings. They could review case studies of interventions or best practices from websites of organizations and then write the lessons learned. These are some of the things. I mean, there could be many more. I think several of our participants, learner participants here, faculty members, can come up with several of these things, particularly to address the challenge of internships and fieldwork for social work. But the challenge is more for the coming year, particularly for fieldwork. I think what we need to do is, as a social work group, faculty and educators, I think we need to find out and bring out fresh operational guidelines. I think we should network among ourselves and bring out operational guidelines for implementing fieldwork with adequate precautions. I think that we are going to, this is the new normal, and we want to get back to normalcy as soon as possible. The community is there. I think they need the services of social work. And I think we cannot stay away from field work for long. And we need to think of ways by which we can have adequate precautions and then start doing field work. But on the whole, I'm just concluding. while thinking about this new normal, both in terms of general education, colleges and schools, and also for social work education, I would like to read out the statement of Mr. Prince Gajendra Babu, who is the convener of Tamil Nadu Platform for Common School System, a very vocal advocate for public education. He says, online teaching cannot substitute the classroom teaching learning experience. Learning is a two-way process. Students cannot be passive observers. Actual learning starts only when the student questions the existing knowledge. Critical pedagogy can be practiced in the classroom alone. Students articulate, analyze, discuss, and learn. The teacher in the classroom plays a vibrant role of a facilitator in the learning process. This is not possible through online classes. Again, I'm going to read out a voice of a student whom I interviewed for this webinar. I don't know who he or she, but the student says that education is not just listening to someone teach. It is the entire classroom experience that makes education complete, which online education doesn't cover. Without library access, and doing that too via browsing on the phone increases the screen time, making students a sort of machine being in one place, staring at the phone. So I think with this, I would like to conclude by saying that I believe that the new normal, what we're talking about, should be really an interim arrangement. And we should go back to the old normal with all the advantages we can steal from the new normal. Thank you. Over to the organizers.
Thank you so much, sir. That was very enlightening and very informative. And I would take the great pleasure in introducing the next speaker of the day, Mr. Prasad Talluri. Is a head in strategy and research management at World Vision India. He served as a strategic advisor, operations business solutions, and the head of resource mobilization as a national coordinator for support office liaison, also at World Vision India. His educational qualifications include an MSSW in CDLCE from Katya University, Warangal, Telangana State, and MABS in Piedmont International University, USA. He also holds a PhD in zoology from Vikram University, Madhya Pradesh. His major awards include the Area Development Program Award from World Vision India and the Madhya Pradesh Young Scientist Award. His trainings include social research methods from the Institute of Social and Economic Change from Bangalore, situational leadership and advanced partnering training from Philippines, and transition and sustainability innovatives workshop from Thailand. We are happy to have you, sir. The stage is yours.
Hi friends, good morning. I hope you're able to hear me properly.
Yes, sir, we are able to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I appreciate this opportunity to speak on the final day of this webinar series, talking to you about the new normal in terms of the social work practice. I thank Dr. Raja Samuel, who laid the foundation in the first session, talking very nicely about the social work education in general and social work education in particular, and throwing light on different issues and how are we going to grapple with them. As we all know that, can I share my screen?
Yes, sir, the screen is visible.
Yes. No, it says you cannot share your screen. Somebody else is sharing the screen. Yeah, just give me a minute. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, Prasad.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. So we are going to talk about the new normal Oh, again, there is a problem. Host disabled participant screen sharing. I'm trying to do it again. Yes. Yes. So I'm going to talk to you about the new normal in social work practice. And we all know that things are not very, very clear as of now. So because we are living in uncertain times still. So these are some of the initial thoughts that came to my mind. I would like to share with you this morning. So as we all know, COVID-19 has taken the world by storm and brought forth a new norm in many areas, which includes social work practices also. And a lot of organizations across the world and the businesses, even the communities, are quickly adapting to this new normal. And there are new issues that communities are grappling with these days, and the social work practices should also gear up to empower them to address these issues. And COVID also changed the entire global poverty scenario. So it's estimated now that the pandemic could push about 49 million people around the world into extreme poverty in 2020. And in India alone, even as of now, 12 crore Indians have already lost their jobs last month amid the virus lockdown. So, and we all aware that we are all as households, both in urban areas and also rural areas, are affected in many ways. So there is a job loss, so loss of remittances, high prices, and the rationing of food and other basic needs, and disruptions to healthcare services and education. And we also see a new phenomenon which is emerging now, which is called as reverse migration, where millions of migrant workers are traveling on foot back to their villages. And we know a lot of them have been facing a lot of health difficulties, even losing their lives in the process. And so the future may end up in that we have a lot more new people ending in poverty in the coming days. So the struggles of a social worker is going to be enormous in this context, because none of us could have really prepared or imagined for this kind of emergency that we are facing now in our country. So as we all struggle personally as a social workers with stay in place orders, social or physical distancing, and the uncertainty about the unknown, so we as social workers are supposed to manage multiple demands, and I am sure that we will have to manage a huge amount of stress even as we are involved in addressing these issues and helping the communities to cope up with this situation. So before going ahead, I would like to mention, or I would like to highlight some overarching themes for social work practice. So I think number one is that we need to focus more on advancing the social cohesion and stability, because there seems to be a social disconnection and we are all locked up in different places, and there is a lot of need to work on how do we advance the social cohesion and also bring some sort of stability to what we are doing. I think the governments and also the social work institutions and the social workers should focus more on this, bring back, as Dr. Raja also mentioned, how do we quickly bring back the kind of social cohesion and stability is something that we need to focus on. And secondly, that we need to focus on promoting social change and development through the liberation and empowerment of people. So I think the most vulnerable people are the ones who have been impacted much. So how do we really bring people out of that vulnerable situation? How do we make people more empowered and liberated is something that we need to think about as governments and as the social work institutions. And thirdly, there's a need to restore social functioning because we know that a lot of social functioning has been disrupted. And there is that we need to focus on restoring that social functioning while enforcing respect for sanctity of life. This is very, very important. This is a time where we can compromise on the human values and the sanctity of life. I think as a social worker and as we are involved in social work practice, this is something very, very important that we need to restore, retain the sanctity of life, drawing on the ideals of social justice and human dignity, that we will never compromise on this, on justice, because it is the poor, it is the underprivileged, it is the marginalized who are suffering more. And how do we bring not only health, not only the wealth, but how do we also look at justice and also human dignity to be restored and retained in the whole scenario? So now quickly, in the brief time that we have, I'm going to talk to you about or highlight 7 emerging needs of social work practice and how a social work practitioner should get should be ready to address those emerging needs. As I told you earlier, these are not final. This is not because a lot of things, as we know, are already in, are in fluid stage even now. So things are emerging every day, and there is a lot of uncertainty lingering. So these are some initial thoughts, and as we go ahead, maybe there are new things that are going to come up, and the social work practitioner should be able to equip himself to address these issues. So number one, as a social work practitioner, need to be agile to meet the changing needs. So it is no more the traditional way of doing things that we are looking at, but we all as social work practitioners should be quickly able to look at the requirements and quickly design new programs and develop them, test them, deploy them, and review them, and go ahead with that. Even in World Vision India, we are quickly redesigning our programs. We are preparing interim strategies. So the strategy that we already have doesn't hold good anymore because the things have been changed rapidly. So we quickly prepared an interim strategy, and we are implementing that interim strategy. So a social work practitioner should be agile and ready to adapt to the changing needs of the community and the needs. So this is the primary thing that I would like to highlight. Secondly, we need to maximize the accessible technology in the social work practice. In World Vision India, in 15 to 20 days, we have done a rapid assessment where we have assessed the needs of children and communities, and came up with inputs or findings which will help us to change our strategy. So this is very, very important that we maximize the accessible technology to connect even to the people. So this is during our rapid assessment, during our survey, it was all done virtually, connecting to the community leaders that we already know in the community. And so as a social worker, we already have established linkages in the community, established connections in the communities. And I think this is the time where we leverage, or where we continue to strengthen those linkages virtually. I know there are limitations, definitely. I'm going to talk about that, but still, whatever existing accessible technology is there, I think as a social work practitioner, we need to maximize on that. So we are in touch with all our 250,000 sponsored children and their families, even in this situation. So it's all happening because of the established connections that we already have, and also how we are maximizing the technology, the virtual platforms to connect with these communities. And this is very, very important that, that the communities among themselves and the community workers, social workers are all connected at this point of time, maximizing the technology. And there is a need to bridge the digital divide. I think Dr. Raja Samuel already highlighted this. This is a very important issue for a social worker to address, because if all the schools are going to adapt the online classes, so and what about those underprivileged children who may not have access to the digital devices or even the internet connection? And we know a lot of them are already there, and there is a potential danger of all those students being left out. So I think there is a need for advocacy here. Definitely the schools are not going to provide these devices, and families will not be able to afford to do that. But there is a need for advocacy. I think that we need to bridge the gap and see that the underprivileged children and the most vulnerable children are not left out of any access. May it be access to education, may it be access to even health. So I think the digitalization of health is what is going to emerge now. So maybe the immunization and other health acts, health related services are going to be provided through digital platforms. So if that is the case, we need to think about the children who are going to be excluded from this entire equation because of the lack of resources at their end. And we also should pay special attention to the psychosocial support, because we have seen, and there are a lot of reports that is coming up, a lot of studies that are coming up, highlighting the fact that because of this lockdown, because of the situation now, there's a lot of child abuse which is happening, and there's a lot of domestic violence, and children, and especially children, are going through enormous amount of stress, and they definitely need psychosocial support. And as we know that there is a lot of limitation as of now as a social worker to reach out to those children, but how do we strengthen those safety nets in the communities? How do we enhance or strengthen those community structures? Maybe, for example, in World Vision India communities, we have something called child protection units. So where these important stakeholders within the communities are responsible for ensuring the child protection issues in the community. So how do we link those child protection units to the children? How do we link the children to the service providers, or maybe helplines? So this is something that we need to constantly think about, and this timely psychosocial support is reaching to all the communities, especially children at this point of time. And social worker should be able to include in his practice the critical incident management and also stress management approaches. And there is also need to protect human dignity. As I've already highlighted, I think this is the time where the human dignity can be compromised. And given the situation, given the demands that we have, multiple demands that we have, it can happen that human dignity is compromised. And now there is a lot of stigma and discrimination that we are already able to see. And we need to really drive this message or communicate this message, saying that we are fighting against a disease, not against the patient. So, so this discrimination and this stigma is something that a social work practice should clearly address, because this can actually create another problem of isolating people and creating, you know, all sorts of new problems. So yesterday I was listening to a story of a woman who lost her husband for this COVID-19, and went back to their home village with her child, and the villagers did not allow her to enter into the village, and she was kept out of the village, and tied to a tree, and she is living there outside the village under a tree along with her child. So that is the situation that we are now facing. So how the social work practitioner will be able to step up and see this kind of human dignity is ensured and discrimination is reduced by creating awareness and by engaging the communities meaningfully in a conversation. And there is a need to encourage and replicate local innovations. I think this is the time that we need to really look for those local innovations and encourage those local innovations, because as somebody said, though we are though all of us are in the same storm, but all of us are not in the same boat. So every situation, every context is different, and it has its own challenges. So I think now this is the time that we encourage these local solutions as a social practitioner and local innovations. And I would like to quickly show you a video where in one of the World Vision India communities, so they came up with a facility where children can wash their hands without touching any surface.
Clean hand, safe hand, and stay safe.
Hello. Right. So you have seen how, of course, this is a very well-known, familiar mechanism that using hand pedals. Pedals are the way that we operate with the legs itself without using hands. But this is one example I would like to quote, and there is a need for many such innovations in this context. And finally, I would like to close with this last point. There is a need to retain the human touch. So as Doctor also highlighted in his concluding remarks, how education cannot be one-sided unless the student is also actively participating in the education, that education cannot be complete. So I think social work practice also is not complete, or it cannot be meaningful without really having that human touch. And I think this is the great challenge that a social work worker and social worker practice, social work practices are going to face in the midst of this social distancing and there is a need to maintain physical distance. So how I think this is where I think we need to come up with ideas. We need to come up with innovations where we really bring our heart to the entire situation. I think it is the social worker who has the passion, who has the heart for the communities and for the people, and should be able to retain that human touch in spite of the limitations that we have. So yes, so these are the seven emerging needs, I think, at this point of time, and a social worker should be able to equip and come up um, to a situation where he or she will be able to address this successfully. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for the detailed and clear presentation, sir. Now we shall proceed with the Q&A session. I request all the participants to leave your questions in the chat box. So our first question is directed towards our first speaker, our principal, Dr. S. Raja Samuel, sir. This question is from Ms. Gracelyn Pavitra. She says that few of her classmates are from areas where there is no network at all, as they even could not contact them. And what are the steps that can be taken to reach out to such students for online education?
Yes, as of now, whatever we have in terms of online education is very bandwidth intensive, which means it requires a lot of bandwidth. Now, we need to find solutions which are not synchronous online education, but asynchronous, whereby modules can be emailed or sent to the students, which are not that much in size. For example, IIT Mumbai, there's one Professor Kannan, who has developed zipped files where there are modules which can be sent by email or even by WhatsApp, and then the learners can download it, because he particularly did it when Kashmir only 2G was allowed recently. 4G was not allowed, and 2G students found very difficult. So he had developed certain modules in language particularly so that they can download the zip files and learn the material, read the material. They're not very bandwidth intensive. So we need to find solutions like that for students who don't have access to bandwidth.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Professor Dr. Janaki. She says that there is a huge disparity between privileged and underprivileged students in attending online classes. Many students in the rural pockets do not have access to digital gadgets. In such a scenario, what can be done to include the underprivileged students or community?
As Dr. Prasad pointed out, that advocacy is something that we need to find, because as he said that the institution cannot provide gadgets, neither the families. So which means who should provide? Who should provide? The state. I think we expect a lot from the state in terms of providing the infrastructure required for learning. Yes, so I think it's a responsibility of state, society to ensure that there are resources for everyone to be included if we are going to push for this online. See, that's why we have to be very careful that how far we can make it compulsory or push this online education.
Thank you, sir. The next question is directed towards our second speaker, Mr. Prasad Talluri. This question is from Dr. A. Sebastian. He wants your view on social workers' concern for economy on productivity during COVID-19.
Yeah, so as I've already explained in my initial slides, now the poverty scenario is changing. And I think it's more of going to be the economic problems that we are going to face. So more than anything else, even in World Vision India's conversations and in our strategies, so we are finding out that the livelihoods is something that is the need of the hour, because millions of people are losing their livelihoods. And how do we and the traditional livelihoods programs that we have been implementing up to now may not be sufficient. So how do we come up with a new kind of livelihood programs, especially in collaboration with government schemes, whatever is available with the government and whatever government is doing, because NGOs alone cannot really address these large-scale problems at this point of time. I think the partnership among the civil society organizations and even the academic institutions, businesses, and also the government is to tackle the problems holistically is what we need to do at this point of time.
Hello.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So the next question is to you from Mr. Arul Kumar. He states that every time we plan sustainable exit strategy, we often find that the project is not sustainable in nature. What are we missing in sustainability in project cycle management?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. And I think there are two aspects to it. Number one is in the project beginning itself, we are clear about what is that we want to sustain. Because sometimes we expect that the activities that are implemented during the project should be sustainable or continue. So it may not be the case, but the institutions within the communities that we are going to develop, or sometimes the development trend that is already set, or sometimes the community-based organizations. So those are the ones which are going to sustain and take the development forward. So when we say sustainability, it is not the sustainability of the project itself. It is the sustainability of the development that started in the community, and how do we ensure that communities themselves will take that development trend forward. That's number one. Number two is most of the times we think about the exit strategy or sustainability strategy towards the end of the project. I think sometimes that is not working. So these days the understanding is that we should have the exit strategy right from the beginning of the project. So when you plan the project itself, we simultaneously work on the exit strategy also, simultaneously empowering people and knowing that one day we are going to leave and this has to be taken over by the community. So I think if we can build the element of sustainability and the exit strategy right from the beginning, we can, I think, definitely see improvement in terms of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question is directed towards Dr. S. Raja Samuel. Mr. Arun Kumar asks for a change or a new curriculum with respect to social workers taking the next position to healthcare workers during the pandemic.
Yeah, I agree with the participant that we have been social work education per se has been responding to emerging issues in several ways. For instance, we have added international social work like refugees, disaster management into social work curriculum. So I think we will be responding in terms of including what social work can respond with. For instance, Dr. Prasad has highlighted what can be the response of social work. I think we need to bring it into the curriculum now, and particularly the specific aspects of how pandemics have to be addressed. All that we need to include in the curriculum. Already there is a base available, but these things have to be add-on so that there is enough content for students to learn about these and then respond also. Yes, we need to work on it.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Ms. Danya Lakshmi. In our society, people have a mindset that art courses are lesser of value than engineering. In this, how are they going to consider the e-certificates credible?
There are two issues in that. Our arts courses generally less valuable than engineering. That's a separate issue, and the e-certificate is a separate issue. Okay, we need to separate that. But I don't think the perception as arts courses are less valuable than engineering courses is currently now, because that situation has changed. Maybe if a decade back there was a lot of emphasis on engineering and like that, but now there's a lot of movement towards arts. A lot of students are opting. A lot of students who even score very high marks are opting for earlier. Those who are not scoring high marks used to come to arts. That's not, I'm not generalizing it, but that was general trend. But now the situation has changed. So I think now there is equal importance for all disciplines. That's something. But about these e-certificates, yeah, that's a very valid question. Now, what I would say is the reputation of the institution that is offering the course adds value to the e-certificate. So it depends on the learner which kind of certificate that he or she wants to choose, which kind of course offered by which kind of institution they want to choose. That's the credibility of the course organizer and the institution is one thing that can be depended on. And I think employees will also look at that. Employees will also naturally look at the credibility of those who are offering the course. Of course, the other issue is of whether e-certificates can be manipulated. Yes, that can be, but I'm sure there are security features available for certificates. Now you have this online certificate verification. Any employer can verify the certificate online. You have these IIT Research Park. There is a setup that is providing this facility where any employer can, verify certificates online. So these kind of measures, I'm sure, will address that. These are issues which are always there. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. The next question is directed towards Mr. Prasad Talluri. Can we correlate sustainable education for migrant laborers and the role of social worker?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And the relationship between the education and migration has been studied and has been an issue for a long time now, because when the community, especially when the parents migrate along with the children, and in the new place, education is definitely an issue. And there are a lot of advocacy that is happening, and even the governments are trying to set up educational, ensure that there is an access to education for these migrant children, but there are a lot of gaps in that. And definitely the education is one important factor which is suffering because of the migration. Now, in this COVID-19 situation, I think these issues are going to be amplified, definitely. And I'm not very sure that we have solutions at this point of time, because these challenges are enormous. And definitely, yes, this is one important issue that we need to look at. How do we ensure that education is not a victim in this entire scenario? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question is directed towards Dr. S. Raja Samuel. This is from Ms. Pavitra Bharati. She wants to know if there will be any measures taken to manage school or college fees in this economy crisis post-COVID-19.
College fees?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's a good question. Now we have already have directions from the UGC and the state government, which have said that don't pressurize students and parents to pay fees, demand fees for the forthcoming, for the past, for the already for last year as well as the coming year. Give them some time. Now, there's actually a very difficult issue because education has been increasingly privatized, and you have majority of students studying in private colleges, and private colleges have to run only with the fees paid by the students. Now, if the fees is delayed, or if there's no money coming in from the fees, that's going to have a cascading effect on others. Like it could be faculty salary or the infrastructure, all that. Of course, some colleges have some kind of corpus or a buffer amount with which they can pull on for some more months, but it's not the case for all the colleges. In fact, I know a dental college, a private dental college that has because that was closed, and they've simply not paid their professors and even the nursing staff and all those who are working there for the last 2 months. They've not paid. So that is the situation that we are facing. So we have to be very careful about this and see what we can do in the best interest of both the students and the college.
Thank you, sir. Next is a suggestion come request from Ms. Sivagami Arun. She states that fresh fieldwork guidelines for social work students, both undergraduates and postgraduates, shall be formed keeping the academic requirements in mind, and she requests MSSW to come up with such guidelines which can be used on a wider base in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, thank you for the session. We will do it.
Thank you, sir. Now I request you to give your concluding remarks for the session.
I think it's been wonderful, the particular topic on social work education and practice, and we are somewhere at the crossroads. I think we have always been at crossroads, but there's a time when we are facing a big shift in terms of our approach to education. I think we have to be very cautious, and both in terms of education and practice, which was really very nicely articulated by Dr. Prasad. We need to be very careful that nobody loses out, nobody is pushed out, nobody is marginalized, and everybody is included. I think that that's the fundamental on which we need to build on anything, whether it's new normal or old or whatever it is. That is a thing that must guide us. That must be a touchstone. Whenever we launch something, whether it is inclusive, whether all can afford it, whether everybody can reach the resource, access the resource, and everybody can be reached. And again, in terms of practice, I think we need to focus on the more marginalized. This process, COVID, as well as the entire socioeconomic process happening in the country, is throwing up a lot of marginalization. And I think social work has to respond to it. That will be the future for both education and practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. This was an eye-opening session with so many of our questions answered. Now I request our second speaker, Dr. Prasad Talluri, to give his concluding remarks for the session.
Prasad, you need to mute yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I completely agree with Dr. Raja Solomon when he said that the most vulnerable and the underprivileged and the marginalized are the ones who are going to bear the brunt of this more than anybody else. So how a social worker in his practices and also in his approaches, even when the policies are framed in response to any of these situations, how we keep in mind these marginalized people and ensure that they are included. And I also appreciate the entire program, and I appreciate the active participation of the participants and the way the questions are asked and interacted. Thank you very much.